I mean, I want to do a bonfire of these big white men's lies because they brainwashed so many generations of people. And Adam Smith writes this book on the wealth of nations, which is really about the theft from nations. And he talks about it being in our DNA to be greedy and take away from others. No, it's in our DNA to protect their share. Look at the langars on the streets where the farmers are protesting, the giving of food.
All of you touched on such important touch points in history, as well as what's happening currently within the landscape of India, from the Green Revolution to the modern farmer bills. But I want to take a step back and rewind a bit. And I want to talk about the beginnings of this shift where we had colonization. And in 1664, the East India Company was created. And one of the major goals was to subdue India's textile economy. And so there was a plan, a systemic plan created to subdue the Indian farmer and make the switch from subsistence farming to cotton crop. And this was a very pivotal point. Not only would this eventually subject farmers to a cycle of interest-laden debt, it would also diminish the food supply. India was to constantly supply the British mills with cotton, being only the exporter of raw material, only to be sold that cotton back at a premium, which left our own spinners and weavers unable to afford that cotton. Britain became this workshop of the world, and especially during the 19th century, the US and British cotton relationship, which was predicated on the use of slave labor in America, also further diminished India's textile economy. So with that framing in mind, Dr. Shiva, you have said that the rupture of oneness with the earth was a very deep construct and impact of colonialism. So we know this to be true when it comes to the modes of agriculture and how our relationship with land and labor is so predicated on output, output, output. So I'd love to know, how do you think colonialism has affected our modern day understanding of both land and labor?
So yeah, the East India Company, as the name tells you, was created to conquer India because India at that time was 25% of the world economy. We were the world economy, and we were the traders of the world for spices and textiles. And given that your platform is a fashion platform, literally till globalization. For me, the poorest woman in the poorest village was walking fashion, because we'd managed after independence to bring textiles back. How did colonialism change land and labor? We never believed in property in land. This is Sabhi Bhumi Gopal ki dharti maa. Even now at the farmers' protest, they keep talking about the mother as, or the soil as their mother. And what they're fighting for is their bond with her. So the British, colonialism was a mega land grab. Not just in India. The peasant lands were taken and became colonial lands. And then the British appointed zamindars. And the brilliant, and this is something you should look at, we have 2 volumes of the ecological history of food and farming, because in the Northwest provinces, as it was called, the farmers' protest started immediately with this extraction of lagan, the rent. And I have links to Sir Chotu Ram, who was the governor at that time of the Northwestern provinces. But the farmers protesting today were farmers who fought against the British zamindari and stayed owner cultivators. They were never working for landlords or were never landlords hiring other labor. But the East India was turned to zamindari, was pushed to famines. And so the land relationship was not totally alienated, and the Land Alienation Act of Northwestern provinces kept the Punjab farmer a proud, independent farmer, which is why they've risen again and again and again. So they made land their property and collected rents called lagan. $45 trillion was transferred by the British. Where did the lagan come from? From the farmers. What was this 45 trillion of wealth transferred to England? The creativity, productivity of the land and the creativity and productivity of the farmer. 45 trillion of this wealth was transferred by the colonial system. And the peasants who created that wealth were pushed to famine, 60 million famine deaths during the British period. Of course, they then created the fabric of theorizing what science is Bacon, what property is Locke, what politics is Hobbes. I mean, I want to do a bonfire of these big white men's lies because they brainwashed so many generations of people. And Adam Smith writes this book on the wealth of nations, which is really about the theft from nations. And he talks about it being in our DNA to be greedy and take away from others. No, it's in our DNA to protect the earth, share. Look at the langars on the streets where the farmers are protesting, the giving of food. This is not about grabbing, it's about giving. So how was land changed? It was turned into property, but of the colonizer. And the original non-property, they were custodians. They were left destitute. But land was also turned into an inert dead matter. And all the theorizing of the Bacons of that time was the earth is dead matter. So not only did it take life, take away resources of the presence, it took away life from the land. And my life's work for the last so many decades, 50 years now, has been to show how capitalist patriarchy totally redefined our relationships with the earth and our perception of ourselves. Our bodies were also turned into inert raw material. And our only work was as slaves. But if you think, and the narrative that was built, it was the mills of Lancashire and Manchester that created the wealth of England. No, they were colonizing 200 years before those mills came. And their empire was an empire of cotton, for which they grabbed all of the land of the indigenous people of the Americas, turned it into cotton plantations. But because it was so much, they then had to capture Africans and slaves and do tell the Black Lives Matter movement that it is time to create a global unity against colonialism. It is not just a problem of one group of people on one piece of land. It's a global problem. And we are connected through cotton being turned from the thread of prosperity to a thread of slavery. In terms of labor, this, I think, is the big deconstruction that has to be done, the decolonization of work. The earth was reduced to land as an inert input, and we were reduced to labor as a commodity to be sold. I'm not going to go into depth because so much has been written about alienation of labor, about extraction of surplus value, the entire edifice of inequality, exploitation, extraction, both from the earth and from people. And sadly, because we've inherited those definitions as if they are Bibles written by Christ himself or Moses, 10 Commandments, people still think within those categories. So people are taking it as inevitable. Even though Gandhi totally challenged the idea of industrialization with the spinning wheel, people are taking it as inevitable that artificial intelligence and robotics is going to destroy all work and 99% humanity will be useless. Now is the time for the spinning wheel in every hand, the seed in every hand. Decolonization means the colonizer's agenda must be challenged with another imagination.